What's up, everybody? Thralls Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic.
I'm Jammin.
And we have an album review for you. And this one's kind of interesting because I have listened to this band in the past, courtesy of a lot of magazines from across the pond, like Terrorizer, Metal Hammer, and so on. But this is the first time I have ever sat down and listened to a full album by this band. So we're going to go over the latest offering from Illdisposed in Chambers of Sonic Disgust. This comes out also on the 28th of June on Massacre Records. This band formed in 1991 in Denmark. This is their 15th album overall. Again, I didn't even know they had that many albums. I know that this band started off as more of a straightforward death metal act and then slowly evolved into more of a groove metal / melodic death metal band. This band features current and former members of bands like Massacration, Corpus Mortal, which I think is really underrated death metal, and Panzerchrist. And yeah, I didn't really necessarily know what to expect going into this band, but after listening to a couple of tracks, I mean, it's kind of a little trip in the Wayback Machine, at least about 20 years.
Yeah, I'd never really gotten into this band either. In fact, to be honest with you, I couldn't tell you whether or not I've even heard them on a sampler. This would definitely be the first time I as well sat down and listened to a whole album, and very much on the Wayback Machine.
One of the first things that I noticed looking up, the details on this album was a very familiar name behind the mix and master, one Tua Madsen, who has worked with a litany of bands that are definitely in this realm in terms of this band's style, but also a little bit outside of that. Dark Tranquility, Aborted, Hate Sphere, and Heaven Shall Burn. All these bands I used to listen to a lot. I mean, actually, some of these bands I still listen to a lot. In fact, I was listening to Hate Sphere not too long ago.
Yeah, me too. I have 3 Hate Sphere albums, I think.
I got them all.
Well, I mean, yeah.
So baseline, a lot of mid-2000s MELODEATH, and I still like MELODEATH. And I still go back and listen to, again, a lot of stuff from that period because that was kind of a big awakening to a whole different style of metal back then. And right away, you kind of get that vibe with the opening track, Spitting Your Pain. It pretty much just hucked to us right on that pain.
Oh my God.
I know. I did it. I had to.
No, you didn't.
I did.
No.
Yep. No. Sorry, that meme has taken over the entire universe.
Oh my God.
Seriously, though, it opens up with a little bit of an atmospheric foray of air raid sirens, comes in with kind of heavy, somber riffs. It's a more mid-tempo kind of start. And, I mean, the production right away kind of gave me that nostalgic vibe because, I mean, this guy has definitely mixed some of my favorite Dark Tranquility albums in particular. But it's groove-based. It's, pretty riffy. The vocals are very prominently roared throughout this entire album. And, I mean, it's kind of got a wide variety of moods, but bass line across this, it has a very somber, gray, rainy day sort of vibe. This is kind of sad boy MELODEATH. I don't want to go outside or see people today MELODEATH.
I wish I had that option today. I would have paid big money not to go outside and see people, but here we are. Yeah, I mean, it's got that. It does get a little bit darker at times, too. Lay Low has a pretty dark intro to it, at least. And then when you get down later into the album, End of My Hate, Pain Suffer Me, songs like that, it does get a little bit darker. So it's not all Gray Clouds and Eeyore style.
A lot of this is based on very straightforward riffs. Not just chuggy ones, but again, kind of those, very hooky, later In Flames riffs or Soilwork and stuff like that. And also a lot of heavy harmonized strumming. They're not the most brutal band, that is for sure. Or at least maybe they were at one point. Again, I haven't listened to their earlier stuff. But it does conjure up a definite heavy sound. It's just more melodically driven than anything else. Even though I do like the fact that this skips over any clean vocals whatsoever. It stays heavy in the vocal department. And I appreciate that because, man, did MELODEATH get kind of swallowed up by that.
Yeah, I mean, the guy for the most part is just straightforward in his approach. It's like a roar, so sits between a growl and a yell. I got reminded a lot of Dez from Devil Driver, just without his more higher pitched screams. That very straightforward kind of roar that he did in even Coal Chamber. it just kind of sits in that register.
I got Cataclysm, and honestly, like listening to this album, like riff-wise, this is almost kind of like the more groove metal equivalent to Cataclysm in a lot of ways.
When they did decide to go clean, and they only did it once, they brought in a female lead vocalist, Sandy the Lilith, from Defacing God. And she's on multiple tracks as well, but her standout performance, as you would call it, is on the track I Suffer.
Yeah, I actually really like that song. It's, you know, again, like that more somber, melancholic, but it also sounds very sinister, and a lot of that is due to her higher screams melding with the, you know, those deep, heavy roars. Now, I've heard of Defacing God. In fact, I think some of these members might share members with that band as well, too. But I've never, like, sat down and jammed their music, and looking at a picture of them, they seem like some interesting people. A lot of this is very mid-tempo, and again, like, listening to the riffs, it's a very familiar period in terms of Melodeath. Like, this is kind of that cresting point where Melodeath started to get, like, a lot more popular, so you started hearing a lot more, like, hooky riffs. Like, this is probably around, like, you know, In Flames, Reroute to Remain, or Soundtrack to Your Escape. It was like, oh man, this band's blown up, and every song got kind of progressively hookier, and you definitely get that in a lot of these songs where there's just these kind of like bouncy kind of grooves, and you get more of those like major chord driven kind of hooky songs like For Us, that song sounds like a mid to late 2000s In Flames single that they would actually spend the time and shoot a music video for.
100%. Yeah, a lot of open strumming going on. It's weird because they incorporate a lot of melody in here, but it's just within the riffs. Like, melody doesn't often take lead, say, center stage.
Generally, these songs are driven by, again, like very straightforward, very hooky riffs. A lot of the riff work actually kind of reminded me of Hatesphere, albeit, you know, played a lot slower. But they kind of just lock on those. Like, occasionally you will get, like, some more layered guitar effects with, like, some heavy atmospheric strumming or some tremolo riffs on top of the main riff. But for the most part, they kind of stick with that riff, maybe harmonize it, and that kind of becomes the hook. And, you know, for melodic death metal, there has to be something that drives the melody if you're not going to be singing a lot.
Right.
And, again, thankfully this band didn't. But the other thing that they do to kind of supplant more melody and more atmosphere are synths. Now, the keyboardist on here, I don't believe is officially a member of the band. I believe it is a session player. And my relationship with synths and Melodeath is, it's kind of a mixed bag. Like, there are bands that do it really well. Like, I love Dark Tranquillity. Their synth work is generally awesome. It complements the music well. It's not just a background atmospheric thing, it's actually part of the song. Here we get a little bit more of like, hey, we have this background effect for this, you know, space that's just open for it. Like, it's there, do something, and then we get, you know, what sounds like kind of just like stock synth patterns.
Like, in the beginning of the song I Suffer, it starts out building atmosphere with like these gothic keys, and it sounds a little bit darker. But by the time you get to the midpoint of that song on the bridge, it changes out of this gothic thing to just like a basic like key noise, and you're like, eh.
Lay Low was kind of one of the big culprits for me. Like, it's a more somber ditty, like, again, sad boy, Melodeath, I don't want to go outside. And it captures that vibe really well. And at the start of the song, and pretty much through most of it, the synths are kind of in the background. They're just like a little bit of extra melody on top of these very, like, Catatonia-ish vibe riffs, like maybe Paradise Lost. But towards the end of the song, they start getting louder and they kind of take over the song. That's kind of another issue in here. Like, I feel like these guitars are just not quite prominent enough. Like, they have a good tone, but there's not enough crunch to them. It's like going to a restaurant and ordering a Coke and they give you a Diet Coke. Like, you notice it's not what you ordered.
Well, it's still a Coke, but
it's wet, drink it.
Like, when you hear the first, I don't know, 15, 20 seconds of a song, you're like, oh man, these guitars have a decent crunch to them. But they never did anything with them. It never changed. That tone never really ever changed. They may have thrown a couple effects on it here and there, but even then, those things don't last long enough. They don't deviate off the path long enough for it to really catch on. Like, they'll throw an effect for just a moment, and then it'll go back to just the same riffy guitar noise, and you're like, all right, well, cool, I guess.
Which is weird because, while this album definitely kind of holds its course and stays in its lane for the most part, there are sections where it kind of deviates off course, and you get, like, some interesting flair. Like, it's not always, like, great, but... there's some really cool moments, and, it's just cool to hear the band kind of, like, break out of their lane and, I don't know, maybe speed a little bit.
Yeah, because on songs like And of My Hate, that starts off blasty.
Yeah.
Like straight blast beats. And the first time you really hear it throughout the record, and then it gets into, like, a groovy double time thing, which they do throughout the record anyway, but it seemed to fit more in that song.
That one and Pain Suffer Me in particular are, like, kind of like callbacks to, like, Slaughter of the Soul. Like, it just kind of has that rhythm. The riffs are notably more intense and aggressive. They still hold on to the melody, but it's played with just a ton more energy. And there's other moments too, like I Walk Among the Living is kind of like MELODEATH Bolt Thrower. It stays in that kind of like double time sort of groove. It feels, a little bit more triumphant, at least compared to, Spitting Your Pain and Lay Low. Those are definitely more bummer music. It's got some solid riffs on it. There's some really good harmonies on it. Like, the song feels more invigorated.
Same could be said for the title track, The Illdisposed. It's got a really cool start-stop syncopated groove in it. It's the first time you hear, like, death growls. Like, they're not full-on death growls, but he growls more than he roars in that song. So it makes it a little bit heavier. And I thought the ending, because there's kind of a breakdown, the breakdown is kind of close to, like, David Vincent era Morbid Angel, just without the tremolo. But, like, the heft of the riff is there. Because he's got those big floor tom hits to accent everything. And you're just like, all right, cool.
The riff is notably heavier, a little bit more on the brutal side. Like, if they did tremolo it up and add, like, a very Trey-ish squealy in there or something like that, it would definitely take on a totally different character. I, for one, think it's kind of strange that this is their 15th album. This is the first time they've done an eponymous track. Like, I figured that'd be like, album number 4. Like, listen, we have an established brand. Let's make a song that's just us, and it's not because I'm out of ideas.
Right. Not at all. And then you get to tracks like Flying Free. I mean, immediately to me, it sounded like Roots Bloody Roots.
It did.
But then you get Flying Free, well, Soulfly, Fly Free, right? The song is kind of catchy, but the thing that caught me was at the end, the only other breakdown I found in the record is Crowbar.
Yeah, it's kind of like a sampler of, like, I don't know, I guess you could say like late 90s stuff, because, I mean, there's a nu metal / groove metal sort of boundary there, and I feel like they kind of like peeked over the wall over at nu metal. It's like, oh, hey, what you doing? You guys got a DJ? That's cool. We have a keyboard player, so we'll just work with that.
They're kind of teetering that line anyway, like with groove metal more specifically, not nu metal, but like groove metal. It's like they're fighting themselves for MELODEATH and groove metal, and I'm not really sure which one wins in this album.
Well, I mean, I feel like MELODEATH is kind of the bass sound, and honestly, like, that's the kind of course correcting sound, because anytime they kind of venture off the beaten path a bit and kind of toy with something else, they return to what I would say is probably comfortable. Again, I don't know in terms of their back catalog, like when their sound shifted or if they had like more experimental albums. I know that at least according to fans, their earlier stuff is more straight up death metal, but MELODEATH seems like the thing they just return to because that's the familiar area, and that is the one that I think probably supplies the most hooks on this album.
Now, they do experiment. There are some definite experimental things in here, like in the song Start Living Again. There's some great triplet chug moments, but when they get to the bridge, I swear to you, it's EDM music. That's kind of an odd experimental point.
Well, they kind of paired it up with, like, I don't know, All the Machine Gun Fire, the opening of Metallica's One.
Yeah.
So you get, like, again, very EDM synths and then gunfire.
Yes.
I don't know if those two meld well. And then also, like, sandwiched between And of My Hate and Pain Suffer Me, you have All Electric, which after And of My Hate, which comes out of nowhere as like the heaviest track on the album, because I Suffer before it, while I like that song, it is way more somber, way more melancholy, like, okay, I'm kind of bummed out. And then all of a sudden, End of My Hate comes in and kicks down the door with, again, blast beats, faster riffs, it's more aggressive. And then the album hits the brakes like it saw a cop and goes to all electric, which is, I don't know, kind of an experimental song. Like, it's really all over the place. It definitely flirts with more major chord-driven stuff, like kind of like Omnium Gatherum, and I guess maybe kind of like a more progressive vibe, just because there's a lot of weird shifts in the song. Like, there's some interesting drum patterns, but like tonally, the song is all over the place. Like, I can't decide whether or not it wants to be a little bit more brutal, a little bit more somber, go for a big kind of like melodic hook, of course, with like growled vocals. The transitions themselves feel kind of knee-jerk at times, and, you know, occasionally it'll tease like something really cool and then it's abandoned for, I don't know, something else. And here on this song is like one of the ones where the synths just sounded out of place, like they just tried to fit them in wherever there was an empty space. And yeah, no, I just didn't like this song.
And another issue I have with this is the songs all share the same setup. Like, they're all verse, chorus, some weird bridge that doesn't necessarily fit. There's only one lead.
I mean, it kind of does, like, again, the mid-2000s Melodeath thing where, you know, like, yeah, you get, like, lead melodies on top of the main riff, but you don't always get a solo unless you're an arch enemy.
Right. And there is one lead. It's very tiny in Lay Low. But, I mean, really, like, there's not a lot going on in these songs. Sometimes they have the proper setup for it. Coming out of a bridge, like, it'll get, like, quiet for a minute, and you think that there's going to be a build, but then it'll jump right back into the chorus. That's another problem I have. Sometimes they rush the builds. And then the other thing is that sometimes it seems like it's just a jumbled hodgepodge of ideas. Because there are some really cool moments in some of these songs. There's a couple of them where they have some off-time grooves that are really cool, but they never stick with it. Again, it always goes back to what they're safe with.
I had issues with some of the pacing too, like especially when you hear End of My Hate and Pain Suffer Me, and there's even a faster section at the end of For Us too. Those faster moments could have been used like a little bit earlier on in the album to kind of break up the pace, because, you know, this album really hangs on to this very mid-tempo groove, and you know, hey, I like those, but the songs started to get kind of samey at a certain point. They were all kind of hanging on to that one particular sound. And bassline, like, while I think this is, you know, good, it's decent, it feels like an amalgamation of a lot of bands that I listened to back then that debatably may have done it a bit better. So overall, I'm going to give this a 3. It's not like the strongest 3, but I don't think this is necessarily bad. It's just kind of plain. But there's a lot of stuff in here that I do like. You know, I like sad, you know, kind of gray, rainy day Melodeath. I like more up-tempo Melodeath. I like Melodeath. And, you know, grooves are fun, but I kind of wish the pace of this album was a little bit different. And, again, like, there's some missed opportunities to take some chances in the songs and kind of break out of the just straightforward song structure that is on most of this. I do think the guest spots from Sandy Lilith really do add a lot. I like her vocals in those tracks. And, you know, the fast barn burners, man, dude, I really wish there was more of that in here, because, dude, that was just instant energy. Within pretty much every song on here, pretty much, I did find stuff I liked, though. So, yeah, if you're a big fan of mid-2000s In Flames, Soilwork, Hatesphere to a degree, Dark Tranquility, yeah, anything that kind of sounds remotely like that, and again, like mid-2000s, I would say firmly locked on that. Check this out. It's a pretty decent album.
I'm going to go ahead and also give it a 3. It wasn't bad, it just wasn't great either. Like, it really sticks to what it's about. It's really just about grooves and a catchy chorus and then some more grooves. For the most part, it's like center lane Melodeath. Like, you could get in the fast lane if you wanted to and pass them. You could get in the slow lane and take your time, but you don't. You're just coasting along in the center lane, and hopefully the guy ahead of you is doing just a little bit above the speed limit just so, you know, you can enjoy your ride. I drive the turnpike a lot. I feel this. This is an analogy that I feel. It's got a decent mix, but so did a lot of those albums, again, in the mid-2000s era of Melodeath. It's pretty much like a basic meal of meat and potatoes, except the potatoes have just a little bit of spice in them. So you're like, all right. I mean, it's got some syncopated grooves here and there. It's got some off-time patterns. There's a couple moments where the drums are really cool, especially the fact that there's blasts in End of My Hate, or the fact that Pain Suffer Me is definitely more aggressive in nature. Like, I wouldn't say any of it's bad. I would just say it's pretty basic. Really, if you like straightforward melodeath, there might be enough in this meal to sustain you. Hate Sphere for sure, Dark Tranquility, a little bit of Carcass vibes. If you like any of those, you'll probably dig this. And again, if you're stuck in the 2010s era and you just want to hear a record that sounds like that, it's pretty much this. So check it out.
So, if you enjoyed this review, give it a thumbs up. And if you are new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We are also on Patreon. If you'd like to help us out there, there's a link down below to thrallsmetal.com. Our Patreon link is there. It is also on our channel up in the banner in the bottom right-hand corner. But if you're looking for Thralls Metal stuff, you have to go to thrallsmetal.com. We have t-shirts, both old and new. The old ones are discounted, provided we have your size. And we even have hats, too. So if you're looking for any of that stuff, click the link down below.
Certainly, last but not least, tons of stuff going on at Thralls of Metal, album reviews, discography ranking. We finally got my sugar all hammered out, so that'll be coming here soon. Collection updates, because this guy can't stop collecting. Why would he? There's music to be had. Is it metal? Is it not metal? States of metal, a bunch of metal things. You're going to see some stuff coming for the remainder of this year. You'll probably be pretty happy with it. We're thankful that you still stick around this long. We appreciate it. All of our family, our friends, our subscribers, people that have become friends. We're all appreciative of you guys. It's been a real pleasure to do this, and we thank you for this opportunity. We couldn't do it without you guys.
Yeah, you guys absolutely rule. And again, tons of content coming. I am going to Florida for a bit, and generally when I go down there, I raid record stores. So believe me, collection note dates are going to be a thing. But yeah, you guys absolutely rule, and I'm going to thank you one more time because you do rule. And we will catch you later.